Hello, guys, and welcome back to another episode of SuperCoach, mates. Well, round 16 is done and dusted, and we are just going to quickly reflect on the round, how we went. We've copped a few injuries this week to some maybe not so critical players, but some people out there might have them. And we're just going to go through some scarce trade options and have a look forward to next week. So I've just got Thomas here tonight. I believe Jonas is enjoying the warm sunshine of Bali. So he's on a well-earned holiday. So it's just Thomas tonight. So as we always do, we'll just quickly touch on how we went this weekend. So just the score, a good player and a bad player from the weekend, Thomas.
Yeah, so I scored just under 2,600, so 2,577, which was good. I was looking at above 2,700 at one point when Petrarca and Oliver decided to go bonkers, but got held back significantly. Obviously, holding English still doesn't help. Basically, played with 21 players with Rioli barely scoring, and Goldstein probably was the worst of the week, just cracking over 50. I don't know what went wrong there, but I think the whole North Melbourne team decided to fall asleep after quarter time. So that's a bit disappointing and a bit worrying going forward if that's what they're going to dish up every second week. But I guess, yeah, definitely stars around. Probably two that have suffered a little bit over the last couple of weeks. Zach Merritt and Christian Petrarca decided to pull the scores out of their asses, and I think Petrarca top scored of the entire round with close to a 190 score, and then Merritt a 140 with 3 goals to give the win to the Dons. So pretty impressive with those two, and I guess gives their scoring credentials back after a pretty poor run of scores from the both respectively for the last couple of weeks. But how did you go, Nathan?
Yeah, I was pretty much the same. I was 25-45. So best player of the week. Well, I mean, at this stage of the year, we should probably really be at full premium, but I'm actually going to give it to Jack Sinclair this week. He wasn't my highest scorer, but he got tagged out of the game last week, and I was really worried about St Kilda on Friday night. I thought Carlton might give them a bit of a touch-up. And they just let Sinclair do whatever the heck he wanted. He just literally had no one on him all night. He found his way to 150. Yeah, I think he was probably the best player of the week, and the worst player of the week. Well, when you score 2,500, you probably don't really have anyone. But this is actually going to be a rage trade for me this week. I've had enough of him, and he's never touching my side again. I don't care if this player comes out and scores 155 weeks in a row, and he's the number one scorer. He will never be my side again, and that is Isaac Heaney. Who I only bought in about 5 weeks ago. 67 points. Literally, I don't know what's going on with him and John Longmire, but please, Longmire, get him up into the midfield. He's being wasted in the forward line. And I'm still not happy with Braden Priest from last week, so I'm going to give another clip to Braden Priest because I've been playing with 21 players for the last 2 weeks. So yeah, Braden, again, please don't do that again. All right. So obviously, as we touched on, we're just going to quickly go through each of the games. So obviously, as we touched on, unfortunately, some players copped some injuries, which probably isn't ideal at this time, given that trades are at a premium. So we'll start with the Brisbane Bulldogs game, and obviously the two big injuries here are Daniel Rich and Dane Zorko. I think Zorko lasted less than 5 minutes, and I think Rich went out in the second or third quarter. So obviously these two are both defender, and in Zorko's case is also midfielder. So I guess you probably got to get rid of these two, but given the fact that they're probably going to fall quite significantly, especially Zorko, what would you be doing, Thomas, if you had both of these players?
Well, apparently Zorko wasn't initially. Apparently, they said he did his hamstring within the first 5 minutes, and then he came on at halftime saying it was just a bit of awareness, and it could be a test for next week. So could have just been an early situation where they said, wrap it up, don't risk it, especially considering they were doing quite well. So I guess he's a wait and see with him because of his significant price drop. He could well be, below 400k quite quickly, depending on what the break evens were. And Dan Rich, I guess his one was the unlucky one because I know there was a bit of conversation surrounding replacements for Stewart, and he was one included alongside Bailey Dale, and Bailey Dale scores almost a 140, and then Dan Rich was on track for a really good score and then pinged his hamstring as well. So I guess it's first of all wait and see to see how long they are. But I guess, if you're looking for a trade-out option, there's not too many, unfortunately, because all the defenders are doing really well at the moment and they're all priced super high. But I guess you got Lockie Whitfield, who's doing okay under the new coach, and even as we spoke off air, Nathan mentioned Nick Dacos. He's obviously someone that has just strung really consistent footy over the last couple of weeks and scored crazy good. Pretty much playing a Sinclair type role. But just obviously as an 18-year-old, just so much class and so much composure off the half back line. And, he scored pretty much one score under 100 in the last 4 weeks. And that was basically, just a touch under. So, yeah, he's one that I guess you can consider. I wouldn't probably recommend it just because as an 18-year-old, you don't know when these kids will start to slow down. But I guess Collingwood are deep in finals contention. So, you want your best players out on track. But, yeah, Rich, I guess he's one that there's not too many surrounding that you could trade him. But I'd probably say Whitfield's your best option potentially. If obviously you can trade up, then you've got likes of Dawson, who's put on a ridiculous set of scores since the mid-year. And then you've got Sicily, just keeps pumping them out. Bailey Dale probably proved to a lot of people why he's going to be so beneficial scoring-wise with Caleb Daniel out of that side. He's basically the main kicker in that side and will take every kick out from now on in. But, yeah, any other thoughts on that, Nathan?
Well, luckily for the people who have Daniel Rich, so he scored 49. His break-even was 65. So he's probably not going to drop too much. I'd say he's probably going to be around the 530k mark. And there are some okay options around that price. So there's so Bailey Dale is actually at that price. So I think he's probably going to be the most popular trading option, given the fact that I think they'll pretty much just about swap prices. So if you've got 15k, I think Rich to Dale will be a very popular one. Otherwise, you're probably looking at needing about 30 to 40k to go up to one of these, bigger guys like Sicily, and I think Dawson's probably too high now, but Doherty, he's only 40k more. George Hewitt, he's a bit of a slump at the minute, but I think he's still coming good. So yeah, I think with Rich, you've probably got more options. As for Zorko, unfortunately, if you've got Zorko, so he was 430,000. His break even was 97, I think. Yeah, 97. The fact he only scored 6, he's probably going to be around the 400k mark, and at that price, there really isn't a lot to choose from. And in that case, I think it's almost worth taking a punt on a Whitfield, or Nick Dacos, or someone like that, because they're
or even oh, sorry about him, but yeah, Kadeem Coleman.
Yeah, or Coleman.
Ridiculously good. I don't know what he's priced at the moment. Give me a sec.
He's 407. He's 407.
Yeah, I'd almost say he's probably the way to go. He looked real good against the Dogs, and just showed with his scoring. He's been warming up since coming off injury and whatnot. But yeah, he seems almost like a decent option, especially now with Rich and Zorko out, if looking likely. But he dominated with the other two out. So he's one, I guess, you could take the risk on. If you don't want to go back to the likes of Dacos and Whitfield, especially if you've had those two in the past, I'd say Coleman's a good POD, especially if you're playing for league. There wouldn't be too many people out there that would be looking for him. So, yeah, I'd say Coleman's
Yeah, he's
A
only
pretty
in
good shout
3% of
actually.
sides. 3% of sides, and I think he really got going once Rich actually went off Kadeem Coleman as well. So yeah, I think Coleman, I'd say probably Coleman, Dacos, and Whitfield are probably the three I'd look at. Well, I don't mind Christian Salem either, actually, now that I look at it. Given the fact I think Melbourne are flying. If they look back to their best, I think as long as he can stay fit, I don't think he's a bad option either. I don't really think there's anyone else here to really talk about from this game. So we'll move on to the other game. Hopefully Tim English is back
Yeah.
next week. We'll move on to this game here. So I don't really know who to talk about from this game. Hunter Clark, this one hurts. I think this is going to probably hurt you, Thomas. I know you're a big Hunter Clark fan. Probably not really super coach relevant given the fact he's been injured most of the year. But from a Saints perspective, he's probably going to be out for a couple of weeks, and it's probably a big loss for St Kilda. What do you think? And Dougal Howard as well. So they're probably two players that St Kilda will definitely need if they're going to play finals. So as a Saints fan, how big a loss are these two players?
Yeah, obviously Hunter Clark had a horrible run with injury. Unfortunately, came back, was meant to come back a couple of weeks earlier, then got stuck with COVID protocols, and then comes back and barely is able to string 2 games together before getting his nose basically broken in multiple parts. So not nice. He'll miss a chunk of footy a game. But I guess Hunter Clark is probably wasn't playing the greatest standard of footy going in to the last couple of weeks, so it's probably not going to hurt as much as probably Dougal Howard hurts a little bit more. But if we're able to get, I think Darryl Joyce is knocking down the door, and Sandy and doing a decent job. Highmore came on and did extremely well, given the circumstances, and look, the reason why he should have been picked a few weeks earlier. But other than those two, I guess looking on the Carlton side, I want to have your opinion on 2 players in particular. Obviously, Doherty and Cripps. So Doherty, very disappointing, I guess, and hurt me as an owner with 75. Are there some concerns there, or do you think it's more of a blip in the radar and he'll go back to his best next week? And obviously Cripps, if you have more trades, do you reckon he's someone that could be on the chopping block for even a Walsh or Parrish or whoever? Just because it just doesn't seem to be cracking. Like he's had the last couple of weeks, sub 100. It's pretty frustrating. As an owner, if you had, say, 7 trades, full team, ready to go, would you be warranting a trade to someone like a Steele who's bounced back pretty nicely after his injury, and someone that's, even a Petrarca or someone like that who's just, found another gear and is able to pump out these 160 pluses? Whereas Cripps for the last couple of weeks has really suffered and not scored as what was likely.
Yeah, I wouldn't be too concerned about Doherty. I think the way St Kilda played, I think they just got overwhelmed, and I think I think it was just a bit of an off night for Carlton. So I wouldn't be too concerned about Doherty now. I was actually going to ask you about that exact trade about Cripps to Jack Steele, so you stole that one from me. I mean, we know that we went through this earlier on in the year, I think, with Jack Steele. So he does seem to average more in the second half of the year. So with him getting back to some continuity, and I think St Kilda have a bit of a tough run home as well. I think those higher contested type of matches will suit Jack Steele perfectly. So yeah, I think if you've got the trades left, like you've got no injuries and you've still got, say, 4 or 5 trades, I'd probably almost consider jumping off Cripps and going over to Steele. I think you probably only need about 30k. I think Jack Steele will probably be at his lowest price this week, given the fact I think that injury-affected score comes out of his scoring cycle this week. So yeah, I think this is the week for Jack Steele, and yeah, Cripps he just is labouring a bit. I think he might be maybe preserving himself. I think Carlton are pretty much guaranteed to play finals now, given the fact that both Port Adelaide and Gold Coast both lost. So yeah, I think he might be just preserving himself a bit for a big September tilt for Carlton. So yeah, I think if you've got the trades, I think Cripps to Steele probably isn't the worst option. And as for Walsh, I think the thing with Walsh, and this got highlighted by David King and Daniel Hoyne at Champion Data, that Walsh is one of the most inconsistent players, and that's because of his disposal efficiency. So when he's on, he scores really well, but when he's off, his scoring comes way down, and his impact on games comes way down when he's off. So that's just something to keep in mind. But you can't deny the talent that he's got. So yeah, I think Cripps to Steele is probably a good option there. What about I don't really. Is there anyone else you want to touch on from this
Yeah,
game?
I think we'll move on. We've got a
Yeah, I
fair
don't
few to
really
go
think
through. So
there's
yeah,
anyone to touch on. So moving on to this Essendon Sydney game, which was a bit of an upset actually. With Essendon winning. Just quickly, have you got Massimo D'Ambrosio? And if you didn't have him, would you regret not getting him in based on his performance on Saturday? Which I actually watched that game, and he looked really, really good off
yeah,
the wing.
he's
What?
off the half back line, moving to
Yeah,
the wing. Um, Pretty impressive. I mean, I jumped in as my last rookie downgrade, so I'd be pretty happy with him. Luckily for me, I haven't really had to use a loop or something. I've got Jacob Ware and D'Ambrosio. It would have been nice if one of them were in the midfield or in the forward line to cover English for the last couple of weeks, but you definitely can't complain. And this is a conversation I guess we'll have when Stuart pops up, and if English misses another week is. Mainly Stuart is, can you just afford to hold someone like him or another injured defender, because there are a few around, and yeah, D'Ambrosio just keeps impressing, and I don't think he'll lose his spot off that for sure. Very talented player and uses the ball extremely well.
yep. I also jumped on D'Ambrosio, and I actually took his 83, which was a mistake in the end, which we'll touch on later on with someone else. But the Sydney Swans, so they've been a hard side to get a read on away from SuperCoach. They've been a hard side to get a read on, and obviously Parker, Mills, and Heaney all had probably down games this week. What are you? Obviously, I think Parker's probably safe given that he's a forward, but have you got concerns about Mills and Isaac Heaney, especially, who I am jumping off this week?
um,
Have you got any concerns with those two, or do you think they can bounce back?
yeah, well, Heaney in particular, I mean, obviously I got rid of a while ago, and you unfortunately hopped on and we'll get rid of this week, which we'll talk about in a minute. But yeah, he's been really disappointing. Apparently had some knee issues or something in the game from what I heard, and just didn't really get going. But I think we just got to accept this from Heaney, is he'll have his moments where he goes in midfield, scores 140, but he just isn't sustainable for the full 23 round season. But yeah, the really disappointing one that I think a lot of people thought would be easily top six was just Callum Mills. Has been really disappointing for the last couple of weeks for owners. He was lucky to get to the 85, I think. 13 disposals and a goal is and it reflects in his dream team when you're scoring 54. Was very lucky to get 85. Apparently scored like 20 points for that goal he scored late in the fourth quarter. That was an interesting score by Champion Data, and I don't think was warranted. But yeah, I think the reason why he's obviously suffered is just not getting given the ball. The likes of Dylan Stevens coming on has impacted his scoring a little bit, I think. just taken a points off him a little bit. But yeah, just been really disappointing with Mills, and obviously someone you're not going to trade out because at any given time you can go 160. But someone that I guess exactly the same as Petrarca in a sense is that he's just been disappointing over the last couple of weeks. And yeah, Sydney have a lot to play for now with losing that to Essendon and having so many more chances than them. You'd expect them to bounce back at some point. But yeah, if you're an owner of one of those players, especially even Luke Parker, I think he was like 70 points at half time and really died out as well. So yeah, pretty frustrating for those guys, and especially if you're an owner of any of them. Yeah, pretty disappointed.
Yes, and as I said, I've had enough of Isaac. He will be gone from Journeyman's FC this weekend. It's just a matter of figuring out who to bring in for him. So moving on to this Adelaide-Melbourne game, and I think pretty much everyone scored as expected, but I will touch on Petrarca. So if there's a game where it's set up for someone to dominate, this is a game. It was a very scrappy first half, and Petrarca's ball use and skills stood out. And in the end, Melbourne ran away with it, but 189. He has been actually a bit disappointing for owners, but he bounced back in a big way. He's probably going to be around the 500k mark now after that score. Can he be a bit of a cheaper option for, say, a Cripps? Because he'd probably almost be downgrading Cripps to Petrarca. And given the fact that Melbourne seem to be at least back to their ball hunting best, is this a good time to jump on Petrarca?
Yeah, wouldn't be surprised if you jumped on this week. I mean, I wouldn't condone it to just go happy, pull the trigger, 100% bring him in. Because we know he's capable of scoring the 90s and between 90 to 100 quite consistently. But yeah, this game he played ridiculously well. He didn't play much in the midfield, so what he was, I watched basically the whole game. So yeah, high half forward could well be the case where he plays that role and pushes into the midfield through rotation and pushes back onto the forward line, which he's one of the best players in competition to do that. And that just showed he dominated. And when he's doing that, he's guaranteed a good score. And Oliver did what Oliver did. I mean, 176. His break even on SuperCoach, or not break even, his projected score was 198 or something. He got very, very close to doing that. Yeah, 193. So he got very, very close to doing that. Yeah, can't complain at all with those two. Those two really put a lift in my step when on the Saturday afternoon alongside with Rory Laird and Jordan Dawson. But yeah, Petrarca in particular, I guess, is one that we all know how damaging he is as a player. And when he gets on a roll like this, he's pretty hard to stop. And then they've got not a must-win match, but they want to win that game against Geelong on Thursday night. And he could be one that could really tear open that game.
Yeah, and obviously we'll touch on Rory Laird again, another 130 score. So he's ever since he's come back, ever since that round one score, he has not gone under 130 since his first. I mean, he has not gone under 105 since his first game. So he is well and truly cemented himself as a premium midfielder from a SuperCoach perspective, and obviously the 32 disposals and 1 goal, 1 is testament to that. Otherwise, I think everyone else in this game pretty much did as expected from a SuperCoach perspective. I think Dawson went huge. O'Brien was someone who we touched on last week as a bit of a cheaper ruck option, and he fired without Melbourne picking a ruckman. So yeah, I think pretty much that game.
The other person I'd say, if you're really strapped for cash, for an option like a Zorko or even you want to go down significantly, someone that I wouldn't mind and wouldn't hate the option would be Stephen May. So he dominated, obviously, with the intercept marks. He's not going to do this every week, and he's got a tough assignment against Tom Hawkins and Jeremy Cameron on Thursday night. But he's going to be below 400k. He had a break even of 152 and was not really obviously going to hit that, but he's low score of bar that injury affected game of 15, I think it was.
Yeah.
And the 66 that he had previous to this game and coming back into the swing of things. Seems like he's found his intercepting best form before that, his low score was 72. So, yeah, he's one that you could almost bring in and then loop around accordingly if you really wanted to do that. And an option, I guess, for those of you who've got Zorko, who we below 400k, I mean, he's going to be a like-for-like swap. And obviously plays a key position, but he takes kickouts for days. And when he's intercepting best, he's pretty hard to stop and showed that on the weekend as well. So, yeah, he's so important for that Melbourne side. And I guess he's not a bad option if you're looking for a cheaper player and someone that, even if you've got 6 defenders, you could easily loop as a D7 if you've got the trades to do so.
Yeah, I would probably say he's a good cheaper option. I just had a look now. Yeah, he's 397. His break even was 152, as you said. So yeah, he's probably going to be about 360k. And yeah, I think so. You're probably saving 40k by doing that trade. Moving on to the game of the round. Definitely not the game of the round. This was a absolute massacre after quarter time. So I don't really think there's anyone we need to touch on from this game. It was good to see Dangerfield back out there, but I don't think he's SuperCoach relevant. But I do want to touch on these key forwards for Geelong. So I know a few weeks ago, you actually flagged bringing in one of these key forwards, being Cameron or Tom Hawkins. Do you think that they're still viable options? Say if you want to jump off a Heaney, or say if you can somehow swing Aaron Hall down into the forward line, if you're still holding on to say a McCartan or someone like that, can Hawkins or Cameron be a good option?
Yes and no. I mean, yeah, it's. I think you take them with a grain of salt with their score today in this game. I mean, they absolutely gave North Melbourne a bath, and you just see the scores there. Tom Hawkins got 20 disposals, 6 goals, could have easily been 9 goals. Jeremy Cameron only less than 120 for 30 disposals plus 4 goals, 3. A lot of these were scored when the game was over, so that's why the scores went off the charts, and I guess half the Geelong team did really well. But yeah, it's one that I guess I wouldn't do it if you're going for overall, obviously, because they're always prone to a stinker, and all you have to do is just clamp them down and they won't score. If I had to pick between the two, probably Jeremy Cameron takes the vote just because he's more versatile, will push up the ground more, gets a second defender, things like that. But yeah, I'd say Tom Hawkins, I think he's priced real low as well.
Yeah, Tom Hawkins is 445 and Jeremy Cameron's 530.
Yeah, I wouldn't, if that's the case. I think purely based on price, you just take Tom Hawkins if you were desperately in need of someone else, because he's capable of doing the same thing. Obviously scored higher than Cameron, and I wouldn't take Cameron at 530 just because that's paying the same as the likes of Liberatore and those who have scored really well. But I want your thoughts on, obviously I have him, but is there any danger of Goldstein moving forward, or do you think it was just an absolute shocking game from the entire North Melbourne division?
Oh, look, I don't know what to make of North Melbourne at the minute. I think they're in need of a massive reset. I'd be surprised if I know I've only got, 6 or 7 weeks left. I would still be surprised if David Noble saw out the year.
Yeah.
I don't know what to make of North Melbourne at the minute. I think they're just in need of a massive reset. Aaron Hall getting injured doesn't help them either. The fact that he's probably their best rebounding half-backman, and he got injured quite early in that game as well. The fact that they played Ben McKay in the forward line, despite having Hawkins and Cameron against them, was bewildering. They only had 25 inside 50s for the whole game down there, which is never going to get the job done against anyone. So I don't know what's going on there. I don't think I could trust any North Melbourne player at the minute.
Yeah.
So if you've got any, I'd probably be looking to jump off them, because I think these sides who are in the top sort of 10 sides, who are probably only the 10 sides left, I think they'll become a percentage booster, and I wouldn't be surprised if, I don't know what North Melbourne's run home's like, but if they've got any one of those top 10 sides, look out, because I think this could be pretty much a go-to, and you're going to have this problem, and you can't have Goldstein scoring a 55 in a prelim final in SuperCoach. It'll cost you. So if you've got any and you've got the trades left, I'd probably be jumping off. I guess the good thing about Goldstein is he does have some price behind him. So I think Sean Darcy's pretty much at the same price as him now. So I'd be just about doing the switch from Goldstein to Darcy if you've got the money, and just hoping that Sean Darcy can get through the season. Given the fact I think Fremantle are still playing for a top 4 spot. So I think Darcy, I think Goldstein out and Darcy in's probably a pretty good option, I reckon.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. Obviously, in my personal situation, I'm pretty strapped for cash because Goldstein was pretty much maxing myself out. But I mean, in his defence, the whole team was a shambles, and you know he was tapping down to no one. I mean, I didn't watch the game, but I could only assume that was the case. Obviously, the concern with Goldie is that you've got Sherry there as a secondary ruck who do take some hit outs as well, but and he even scored higher than Goldie. So, yeah, I think it's a bit of a shambles. I'm not too concerned considering that Goldie scored a 120 against O'Brien last week, and he played against Blitzarves and Stanley, who are known to mitigate ruckman quite effectively. It'll be interesting to see against your mob next week. He plays Darcy Cameron and Mason Cox. I guess the benefit that he goes forward, he doesn't have to worry about Darcy Moore as well. So, yeah, it's an interesting one. I guess, you know, I wouldn't be dropping off. You've got Oscar McInerney who did the same thing, scored a 60 odd, and he was one that was touted to have a strong end to the season. I guess the benefits with ruckman is that they can, you're not going to be suffering a 20 or 30 pointer anytime soon, hopefully, just because they're going to get tap outs. They're going to be around the ground somewhere. But, you know, if anything, that North Melbourne need to respond ASAP after that smack against your mob next week, which would be a big game, I think, for both teams involved, because obviously Collingwood can't lose that game, and North, you know, would want to win that game to prove any credentials, and then basically I think David Noble's playing for his job. But I guess a quick one for you, Nathan, is what are your thoughts on replacements? Farron Hall, obviously people brought him in for a Stewart replacement, but yeah, looked basically pinged his hammy, or I think it was a calf, in the first 5 minutes of the game, and I guess that was the warning. Bringing in someone like a Hall, and he basically scored 20 points in about 5 minutes and looked like he was going to easily ton up. But what are your thoughts on trade outs for Aaron Hall? Similar boat to Zorko and Rich, you're assuming?
Yeah, I think go through the options we had for Zorko and especially Rich. I guess it's a little bit harder for Hall because he's only 508k. Now, luckily for him, his break-even was 51, so he's probably not going to fall too much below 500k. But still, like, if you've got 40, like, you still need 50k to go up to a Bailey Dale. You know, you still need 40k to go up to Dan Houston. You know, you've got Angus Brayshaw. I think Jonas's mate Isaac Cumming might be a good option at that price. So yeah, I think if you've got the 50k, I think just play it safe, go up to Dale. But otherwise, refer to our options for Rich and move on, I guess. But you probably shouldn't have brought him in the first place, given that he's literally a walking hospital, as we say, and his body just lets him down all the time. So, so moving on to this game here, the Gold Coast and Collingwood game. So I know we spoke about this player as a potential trading, but can you possibly bring back in Nick Dacos, given that I think his 4-game average is over 120, and he went 143 on the weekend with 37 disposals, and I think his kicking efficiency was 92%. And I think at one stage he had like 20 kicks and he was going at 100% by foot. So if he continues up ball use, he's going to end up being a top 8, top 10 defender by the end of the year if he's not already there. Can you bring him in, or do you have your worries about picking up a first-year player this late in, or do you even have a rule where you can't bring back in someone who you've already traded out?
Yeah, it'd be a bit frustrating. You bring him in and he just stuffs it up again. But yeah, he looked really impressive last couple of weeks. This was obviously one of the first times I've watched him play full, and he dominated. There was no Gold Coast player nearby him that he probably didn't pay the respect that he deserved. He's just so clean. When he gets the ball, he was going at 100% disposal efficiency rate for a lot of it. I think the one issue is, as you alluded to, he's a first-year player, so you've still got 6-7 rounds left. You're going to come up against some teams that, obviously you play North Melbourne next week. Even though he's probably going to score really well there, you've got a couple crunch games towards the end of the season. I think the worst possible scenario is you bring him in thinking he's going to be a premium and then gets absolutely queened up in a pretty contested affair. So it's one that I personally wouldn't indulge in, but I know there'll be players out there that might take the risk on him. Would be very surprised in the next couple of weeks if opponents' defenders don't, maybe they play a defensive forward on him or something just to quell his influence. Another issue could be moving forward. I mean, it's clutching at straws more so. It's obviously Darcy Moore seemed to initially thought was an ACL, but it seems more like a hyperextension. Could be just a PCL injury the way he landed. But if he's out, I don't know how that affects the whole structure of Collingwood and whether those smaller defenders who get a lot of cheap ball, obviously John Noble, Braden Maynard, whether that's being more accountable for their direct opposition rather than running off and looking for that cheap one too and driving forward. But yeah, like he just reminds me of what Sinclair's doing at St Kilda, and it's very obvious, evident when when the opposition put a defensive forward on him, he quelled his influence a fair bit. And I wouldn't be surprised if they did to Dacos just to quell his feathers a bit. He could be getting his tail up a little bit as a first-year player dominating, but wouldn't be surprised if, that happens. And there's someone else that I want to touch on quickly would be Isaac Rankin. Someone that is just, gone under the radar, I think, and has just absolutely dominated. Not necessarily matches and match winners and whatever, but SuperCoach scorer and just keeps getting it done week in, week out as kind of just a consistent player that no one expected. He was not even probably in the best 22 for Gold Coast early on the season. It's just, just dominated week in, week out, has provided a scoring outlet for Gold Coast. Do you think if you wanted to go completely point of different in a league situation, you would go down that route, or do you think now the Gold Coast are pretty much out of finals with that amount of injuries they've got, you think that he's just going to tire out as the season goes on? What are your thoughts on Rankin?
Well, considering the fact that the last time these two sides played, he only scored 3 points. He had 3 kicks and 5 handballs for the whole game. So it's a 107-point turnaround from Rankin. Look, a small forward in a side that's probably out of the finals race now, you'd think. I think they've got one last chance. I think the fact that they play Richmond this week, and I think Richmond are currently in 7th place, might keep them in the race, but it's definitely their last chance. So I think for Gold Coast, this is literally their elimination final against Richmond. If they don't win this, I don't think they can make the finals. So I don't think you can pick a player just based on 1 week, because the concern is if they do lose to Richmond, then what happens to their motivation? What happens to their way? Does it all just fall in a heap, or do they just, because they're really just playing for pride now, they're not really playing for anything? So it could help him because he is one of those players who seems to be who seems to relish just being given the freedom. So with them just playing for pride, it could also help him. But yeah, I don't think I could go down that path. And the fact is 436k, I think I'd rather go and pay the extra 100 odd K or even the 50k and get Adam Galore, or even go up further to say a Parker or a Bontempelli or someone like that over him just for consistency. But I want to get your thoughts here on Jared Witts, who only scored the 63 points. So he was the number one ruckman, I think, for a lot of the year. He's just tapered off in the last sort of 3 or 4 weeks. Any concerns here with Witts? Or I guess you probably can't really get rid of him unless you've got 5 or 6 trades left. But is this a case of just hoping he turns it around?
Yeah, it's pretty frustrating as an owner. I mean, I brought him in basically at his 617k, and he's now scored me 260s and a 140, obviously against a ruckless Port, which I mean any half decent ruckman can do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is concerning. I'm not exactly sure what the issue was, whether he's battling or he's just tiring out. I mean, at points it felt like Darcy Cameron was out rucking him at stoppages, even though Witts is a lot taller and a lot stronger. But it would be interesting to see your thoughts if it was a situation where you thought Cameron just completely out-muscled him, or you feel that there is something underlying that he's just struggling a little bit. But yeah, he just didn't seem to cover the ground that effectively and just really didn't get in the game at all. Even against Port Adelaide, he started really slowly and then got going real quickly. So yeah, it'd be interesting to hear your thoughts. But there is a fair bit of concern there. It's a similar situation to Goldie in a sense that it is concerning that they're pumping out these. I mean, obviously North Melbourne's a completely different scenario. Gold Coast playing finals. Yeah. So yeah, there'd be a bit of concerns there when he's not even hitting a 70. But yeah, it'd be interesting to hear your thoughts, Nathan, on Witts, and what are your thoughts on his performance against Collingwood? Presumably you watched that game.
Yeah, I did, except for the last 2 minutes because my family members couldn't watch it, so I turned off the television. But I think the thing with Witts, I'm not sure what his marking's like, but he didn't seem to clunk many marks on the weekend. He only had 2 marks on the weekend, which you would expect for someone who's as tall as him. He's 209 centimeters. You'd probably expect him to take more marks than that. Like, by comparison, Darcy Cameron had 6 marks. Mason Cox had a bit of a quieter game, but he's a bit of a bigger game player. But yeah, I think the problem, is Collingwood. Darcy Cameron actually won the hitouts against him, which I think is a massive concern given the fact that Darcy Cameron, for all intents and purposes, is only a second ruckman who's playing as a number one ruckman. But I think the Gold Coast Suns were still good enough to win the clearance battles. So, yeah, I think he's just in a bit of a slump at the minute. I think you've just got to hang on to him. I don't think there's really much you can do. You've just got to hope that he turns it around. I mean, he's not the number one ruckman for no reason. So I think you'd be clutching at straws to trade him out. But yeah, it's definitely not ideal timing for him to have a bit of a lull. And someone else whose timing is probably one of the worst times to have a bit of a quieter game is Jack Crisp. And we'll touch on De Goey at the same time as well. So Crisp only the 18 possessions and 79 SuperCoach points, and De Goey only 11 disposals and 44 points. You probably wouldn't have De Goey given the fact that he's missed the last week. But what are your thoughts on Jack Crisp? I know our colleague Jonas is a little bit concerned about his ability to win the ball in contest. So what do you think about Crisp going forward?
Yeah, he was pretty much non-existent for a lot of it, and whenever he got the ball, he just butchered it. I remember in that last 5 minutes of play, just every time he got the ball, he turned it over, which would be pretty frustrating for an owner. He did salvage his score somewhat. I think it was only 35 points at 3/4 time. So
Yeah, he was.
Or he did it quite well to get back to an 80. But yeah, there is some concern, and you can probably blame Nick Dacos for his
Yes, I think you can as well.
fall down. Yeah, Chris. I mean, to be fair, they got beaten in the midfield. Unfortunately, Miller and Rao just dominated. Noah Anderson there as well,
yeah,
which I guess is a little bit concerning moving forward against the premier midfields of the competition. I mean, when Grundy comes back, it'll be a different story. But yeah, Crisp, I just don't think fits the mold of that midfield quite well. Plays a lot better when he's at sweeper role, when he gets the ball out and then just boots it forward, or he plays at half back role really well. And yeah, Nick Dacos obviously probably not mature enough to go into midfield quite yet in a centre bounce rotation. And I think that's negatively impacted Crisp significantly. I mean, you'd be wanting to trade out if you got the trades, because I don't think he's just one that I guess moving into next season when we rip open SuperCoach next year, if the case may be, I mean, Crisp probably doesn't end up in my starting team just because he's consistent and he plays every game. But yeah, he's just prone to these awkward scores in the back end of the season when we're really wanting our premiums to do so well. And you've got the likes of Sinclair, Dawson, Sicily just dominating 130 pluses every single game. A 79 in a game where you expect a lot more for him. But yeah, he's pretty frustrating. But I guess there's not much you can do, and hopefully that he'll bounce back. Plays North obviously on next weekend, so should hopefully, fingers crossed, get a pretty decent score there. Considering you want to win that game to kind of rubber stamp your claims in a top 8 position. But yeah, he's one that there are some concerns, but again, there'd probably be more pressing concerns rather than Crisp. I wouldn't be trading out, just because I think if you're strapped for cash as well, if you had a lot of cash, a lot of trades, different story. But if you're strapped for cash, you might want to hold on to him against North Melbourne and see how he goes.
Yeah, I think the North Melbourne game might be a bit more of his style of game. Given that I would expect Collingwood to run all over the top of North Melbourne, given what we saw against Geelong. So I think I'd be holding on to Crisp, and yeah, hoping that he can bounce back. I don't think we need to touch on the Goey. I don't think we need to touch on the Goey. I think if you've got him, just get rid of him. I think he might go gangbusters next week because they're playing North Melbourne, but as a Collingwood supporter, I definitely hope that he can bounce back. Moving on to today's game, so the Richmond West Coast game. So obviously the big news out of this game, I don't think many people would have him, but obviously Dustin Munn copped a hamstring injury in the third quarter, which I think Damien Hardwick described as hamstring awareness, which I have no idea what that means. So the fact that it's a hamstring probably places him in doubt for next week, or at least a test. What would you be doing if you one of these souls that has Dustin Munn? Would you be looking at moving him on, given the fact he has a hamstring injury, or do you look at it the other way and go, well, he got 92 from 3 quarters, so it might be worth keeping? What do you think?
Yeah, I'd be very surprised if anyone had Dustin Martin, unfortunately. I think if you do have him, you just wait and see whether or not he'd play next week if they just rested him, considering they knew, even though West Coast did make a fight back, they knew that he'd come back on top of it and see how he goes there. But yeah, I'd say that you just hold him if you do have him and just see what happens from there.
Yeah, and obviously the other injury, I don't think anyone would have him. In fact, 226 people have this player, but Elliot Yeo, who has been moved to a half-back line, but he also did his hamstring. So I guess that's unfortunate for him, given his wretched run with injury. So I just want to quickly touch on this player. So I know a few weeks ago you actually spoke about getting rid of this player, but Jaden Short for Richmond only scored the 82 points again, and he's been really disappointing for probably the last month or so. Probably the last 3 weeks. what are you doing with James Short? And is this just a case of unfortunately just having to keep him, or do you think you're in a position where you might be able to potentially get rid of him? What are you doing with James Short?
I'm probably a bit. I mean, I've got 4 trades, so kind of hold off a little bit longer and until SuperCoach finals and things like that when I'm pulling triggers like that. Yeah, he's in a situation where he's been affected by his positioning. Daniel Rioli's benefited from that. I mean, basically not swap roles, but because Short's gone in the midfield, the defense is really, well, the defenders in that Richmond side have benefited from him getting all the points off kickouts because he was obviously someone that dominated from kickouts and the cheap 1-2s. Just I think because Presti's gone, they've liked having Short in there with the long kicks and things like that. But for SuperCoach wise, is worse than anything you can imagine because he's losing 40 points basically every single game because the contested nature of the midfield, he's not getting it as easily as he'd want, and as a result of that, his efficiency kicking wise is just really impacted, I believe so. And just disappointing. And when you're losing 30 to 40 points because of a positional change, you couldn't spell any more danger. So one that I think I'm just going to have to hold out and hopefully he bounces back. But at the moment, the best you can expect from Short's about a 90, which is very, very frustrating. But I'm assuming that a lot of people either just don't have enough trades to facilitate that, or there's not anyone around that be screaming pick me instead of Short. So he's one that I guess you just hold on to and maybe hope that he moves back in defence if anytime sooner. He just gets another ton somewhere down the track, but doesn't look likely at the minute.
No, and I'll just quickly touch on it. It was good to see Nick Nat Anui back for West Coast. He may come into calculations for SuperCoach finals if one of these other ruckmen don't. I mean, if one of these other ruckmen get injured, given his scoring power, but then again, there's question marks over his body. But when he plays, he scores. So, I think Nick Nat might be a potential option if, say, an English or a Wits goes down injured, or you're looking to sideways someone. I think Nick Nat will come into calculations there. Moving on to this Western Sydney and Hawthorn game, which was an absolute downpour up there in Sydney. Poor old, I think Sydney is due for about 150 mil of rain today, and it showed with this game literally being played on a mud paddock. But obviously, the Giants here having 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 players scoring over 100, and then another 4 in the 90 mark. So I want to touch on Harry Himmelberg real quick. So 101. Has he got to the point now where if you took the punt on him a few weeks ago, where you can just keep him as a F6, or do you still plan on trading him at some point down the line? What are you doing with him?
I mean, I obviously picked him up at not his lowest point, but after a couple, good scores, I picked him up at low 400s. I guess he's one that, you just keep riding the wave, and I don't think you'll be trading him out anytime soon. You just, to score 101 in his role, where there was absolute shit show of weather, you'd be more than happy with, and he just keeps scoring. I think the difference between him and another defender is he's just so effective with his kicks inside 50. He can hoop for about 60, 70 metres.
Yeah.
And he's a main kick out taker for GWS at the moment, just because he's so effective in starting their attacks, and they've done it a couple of times where he just kicks it down the middle and they've started a goal chain through him. So I definitely wouldn't be trading him out, even, maybe once he starts. Maybe if they make the switch permanently and after a week or two he really suffers with his forward line, if he's back in the forward line. But if he's stuck in defence and he stays in defence, there'd be no reason why, because at the moment he's scoring like a top 6 forward.
Yeah, he's obviously 101, so I think his break even was 113, so he's probably going to drop slightly money-wise. So if we only had him in for money, which originally I did, I think now's probably the time to get rid of him. But the way that he's scoring, I don't think you could get rid of him. And obviously, as someone who I think we forgot to mention, I think Isaac Cumming is still a good option if you're scratching around for, say, a Rich or Aaron Hall. I think Isaac Cumming is just below the 500k mark. So I think Cumming is definitely someone who you could probably get onto. And speaking of bringing back players in, so I think you were unfortunately someone who traded out Stephen Cornelio.
Oh no, I kept
Can
him.
I know you've kept him,
I held
okay?
him. Yeah.
So if you've got Isaac Heaney and say you've got I don't know what the price difference will be, probably 100k now or close to it. How much is Cornelio?
Maybe like
570. So
540.
you need
Yeah.
130k. Could you potentially bring in Cornelio again for Heaney?
Yeah, I guess he's one that is prone to potentially moving into a mid-forward role occasionally, but it just seems like under the Counter McVeigh's caretakership, he's not going to move there anytime soon. And yeah, he's one that is going to finish off probably in the top six forwards because of his move into the midfield. He's one that I guess, there are risks here and there with him, just with, his ability to pump out some low scores. But I guess if you've got the option to, I wouldn't see why not. That's a bad idea. If you've got your Bontempellis, you've got your, whoever else is in the top six forwards, you've got your Tim Englishes, even though he's been missing for a while. You got everyone else. I think he's one that, not a must have, but if you're looking for a trade in, but someone that's close to, just because we all know how well he scores. And for anyone to score, get 31 disposals is an absolute torrential downpour, and you're not getting better scores because it's wet and the champion data is being nice and they're just giving +3s to every kick, that you're going to still be impacted because of turnovers and things like that. And for him to have 31 disposals in those sort of conditions, yeah, he's just locked in, and I think they're not going to be moving him out of that midfield rotation anytime soon. I don't think so.
Yeah, I think they'd be crazy to move him out of the midfield given how well he's gone. So I want to talk about Jacob Ware, or Ware, however you say his name. Now, might be a bit of an odd one out here, but I actually traded out Ware last week for D'Ambrosio, which allowed me to get in Marcus Bontempelli. If you say have D'Ambrosio and Ware, could it be worthwhile actually moving on Jacob Ware, given where his value is, and banking his money and potentially upgrading somewhere else if you're looking to do that? Do you think Ware is an option, or do you think you just have to keep him because of his role in the side and the fact that he's probably not going to get dropped? What do you think about that?
Yeah, it's a tough one because, it's one that I guess he's made his cash that in any other given situation, if it was mid-season, you'd trade him, happily take the money and move on, especially if you can afford someone like a Bontempelli. But like I've got a scenario where I've got D'Ambrosio, and where it's just, as I said earlier on in the podcast, it's a bit unfortunate that I can't move one of them into the midfield or forward line or things like that. That would be very handy because basically I've got Judson Clark and Morris Rioli covering the other two lines until Mitch Owens comes back or something like that. So yeah, he's one that I guess it's helpful if you have both, because I don't know, hypotheticals, but just say a short goes down with a concussion, misses a week, you can then loop Ambrosio and Ware and take out whichever score you want. So in that situation, if you've got both, and you have, say, below 5 trades, I wouldn't be entertaining getting rid of Ware to a non-playing rookie and just upgrading elsewhere. I think you just keep him on. If you have, again, 7 to 8 trades and you want to upgrade, I don't know, a Heaney in your situation, Nathan, or someone like it that's lost a lot of money, and it looks like to keep losing money, or you have a Zorko or someone and you can really use that money to get to a Dawson or a Sicily, I'd 100% do that if that's the case. But I think just having the luxury of having those two on the pine is pretty useful when it push comes to shove, and you could play a defender for a week, and all of a sudden you've got those two that can easily, or have shown to score a bit close to 80, 90 points.
Yeah, I would go along with that too. Otherwise, I don't really think there's anyone else here to touch on from this game.
Let's move on to the last game of the round.
We'll move on to the last game, and then I've got one question for you, which we forgot to touch on earlier on in the podcast. But so this game here, so Fremantle and Port Adelaide. So I think this probably effectively ended Port Adelaide's season, at least realistically. There might still be an outside chance. So Nathan Fife. So I don't think many people would have him. What are we doing? What are your plans going forward for Fife? Do you think he's an option maybe for next year, given where his price is going to be at? Or do you think he's on your no-go list? What do you think the future holds for Fife?
Yeah, I'd be incredibly surprised if someone had Fife in their side, considering he just came back a couple of weeks ago. So yeah, this would be more of a conversation about next year. I just don't think he's an option anytime soon, unfortunately, just because they're now using him as a high half forward, similar to Petrarca in a sense where he's not going into the midfield rotation as such, but he's just pushing up as an extra midfielder in the forward stoppages, which makes him real dangerous. And we all know how good Fife is. And I guess him not being in the midfield mitigates the risk of him being injured anytime soon. So, yeah, having him just forward is a pain for any defender, I think. Just an extra body is a very, bulky midfielder as well. It's not like he's a skinny lad anymore, and we just put him in the forward line to cover him a little bit. But yeah, he can dominate a game off the forward line himself. So just an extra addition to Freo's dominance in the last couple of weeks. So we're pretty lucky to get away with this game a little bit, considering how well Port were coming back, and they snuck home considering they were 40 points up and they chopped that margin down right back. But yeah, it's one that I think is a no-go from here on in. For next year and years coming. I think he's reached his kind of end in SuperCoach relevancy unless he comes back into that midfield side. Unless he's, a different conversation maybe, and it could well be if he comes in mid-forward status next year or a forward player, because we all know what he's capable of, but it's kind of hard to gauge what they're doing or what the plans are with Fife just because he's had his second game back from injuries galore, and it's going to take him at least a couple of weeks to find his feet. But come finals time, and we all know what he's capable of, I wouldn't be surprised he just dominates a final series.
Yeah. And I want to touch on Dan Houston real quick. So I can see he's got the Band-Aid next to him. I think he had a bit of a soft tissue problem. So only the 62. I should just point out too that SuperCoach has reopened. So there might be some quick things we touch on that we've previously gone over. But so what would you do if you had Dan Houston and say he's going to miss weeks? This is hypothetically speaking. So he's going to miss, say, 2 or 3 weeks with a calf injury. Obviously, defender midfielder, what would you do if you had him? Is he a trade, or do you think you can afford to keep him?
Yeah, I think someone like Houston, I don't think he'll miss much. It didn't seem like a big issue when he came off. Definitely not one that's a long term. So yeah, this would be the perfect opportunity. As I said, if you had, I know there's players out there. I've got Nick Dacos on the bench, so perfect opportunity to put him on and reap the rewards. Even if you have D'Ambrosio, where this is what I mean about swapping those two around and giving the best option, and you not having to waste a trade to someone speculative, especially if you're strapped for cash. Because Houston's obviously not the top scoring defender, and you probably don't have the luxury if you didn't have enough money. But yeah, he's one of those situations where, you use that benefit of having 2 decent bench players, and that's the whole reason why the bench cover's there, is to give you coverage where you're not suffering, say, a 60-point difference to what you additionally had when Houston was on field.
Yeah. So obviously, I don't really think there's anything else to talk about from this game. So, one thing here, this is slightly off topic. If you are in our situation, so you've held Stewart and Tim English, obviously Stewart's still going to be out. I think it's till round, is it 19? I think it is.
Yeah.
Round 20, and Tim English, I don't know what's going on with Tim English. Well, we'll speak about Tim English first, given the fact that he's in a ruck spot, and probably most people don't have a decent R3. If Tim English misses again this week, what do you do with him, given the fact that we're approaching the finals now, and you need to have a 22 player complement on the field? Is it time to trade out Tim English, or do you just have to hold him?
Yeah, it's a really tricky one because he's obviously not lost his value, which is really good. Who did they play this week, actually?
They play Sydney Swans on Friday night.
Yeah, so he's one that it's a bit frustrating because I don't think I'd be very surprised if he misses. It's a must-win game from them. They're two sides that are very similarly based, and Hickey could, really dominate that ruck if English is not there. Just because I think with Hickey being a lot more mobile ruckman compared to someone like a McInerney on the weekend. I mean, they already got slaughtered without English on the weekend, and they play Sydney, who even more mobile ruckman could really cause some damage around the ground. I think they probably just need English to play. If he doesn't play this week, it'd be an interesting one because if you're playing for league, you probably hold. If you have a donor, I would entertain maybe moving down to a Darcy and just getting points on the field if you want to get a zero. If you're looking down at the barrel of a zero. So it's one, but then Darcy has a pretty tough ask against Ryder and Marshall next week. So I wouldn't be expecting a huge score with Darcy for that St Kilda game. So he's one that, I think if you're playing for overall, that's when you look to trade. If English misses another week, but you've held this long, I'd be pretty frustrated to hold to trade now. And you just hope that maybe every Ollie or a Clark or someone else, a Connor McDonald, could just hold out for one more week. But it'd be definitely frustrating. Stewart's one that I guess you almost, you've already, if you held this long, you could potentially just keep holding the way that D'Ambrosio and Ware are going, because you could probably get a 60 or 70 pretty comfortably. And as long as the rest of your team's pretty stock standard, especially if you say you didn't have Short and Crisp and you had Sicily and whoever else that are doing very nicely, then you're more than happy, may as well hold him, because it'd be a nice point of difference going into SuperCoach finals, considering that Stewart got a 161. He hasn't dropped much in price. It'd be difficult for people to bring him back in towards the back end of the season.
Yeah, so as I said, so obviously SuperCoach is reopened. So just touching on, the jump from Patrick Cripps to Jack Steele is $23,000. I would probably almost think about doing that, given the fact that price difference is where it is. But we'll just quickly go through some vice captain and captain options early on. So I'll quickly get up the games for next week, and we'll go from there. So let me get them up. So round 17, and it's gone quickly. So these are the first few games of the week. So what sort of catches your fancy from these games here? Because this is probably the games that we're probably going to pick. What catches your fancy from those games?
It's an interesting one because you obviously immediately looking at an Oliver type leading into the weekend as a VC option, but it's a tough one because they play the Cats, who could put some work into Petrarca and Oliver. It's an interesting one, but I'd probably put the VC on an Oliver, just because we all know how well he can score. And if he gets to 130 and 40, just take it. You'd hope that Gawn's back by then and provides premium ruck service to those players. And then moving into the weekend, There's not too many options. I probably would want to stay away from the Dogs players against Sydney because Sydney like to restrict midfielders, opposition midfielders. But looking onto the Sunday games, that's probably where my captaincy lies. You've got Neil against Essendon, especially at the Gabba, could do some damage there quite considerably. And then Rory Laird, probably a very safe option, even a Jordan Dawson as well.
Yeah, so I think that if Tim English is named, I'd almost give him the vice captaincy, considering the fact last time these two sides, he scored 152 points the last time these two sides played way back in round 3. Would it be crazy to put the vice captaincy on Nick Dacos against North Melbourne? Could you actually do that if you had
probably, yeah, I mean, the way North Melbourne's probably going, you could probably do it. But yeah, wouldn't be surprised if North are that desperate and they put some pressure on him as well. But yeah, it wouldn't be out of the realms of possibilities for Dacos.
And I think the safest captain this week has to be Lachie Neale against Essendon. I think the last time these two sides played, he's got 198 points. So I think you'd be crazy not to put the captaincy on him. But yeah, just quickly touching on I've just done my Heaney to Parker trade, and I've projected 2,700 this week. So I think there's going to be some big scores again this week.
Yeah.
So
yeah, there'll be a few big scores coming up, that's for sure.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, that's all we've got time for today, and hopefully we'll probably look towards getting some guests on towards the latter end of the season, just see how those will be interesting to see how those guys we brought on early on in the season went throughout this year. And yeah, hopefully you guys have a solid season. Not a solid season, a solid week ahead. Moving into round 17, there's not many rounds to go, and hopefully get your trade sorted and your team primed for the weekend. And we'll catch you on the flip side for a look into another round of footy.